to dream up new ideas. Longing for a taste of something sweeter than the daily rations of rice or bread, some even worked out a way of baking delicious cakes.
Macam kek pisang, kek nanas, kek apa semua dah biasalah. Ni kita pergi ke kek sekali-sekali time hari cuti special for hours lah. Jadi time hari perjumpaan tu dapatlah Milo. Jadi Milo, gula, jadi ada kelebihan sikit. Jadi masa itulah kita menggunakan kelebihan tu. Roti kita simpan sebelum nak mula kita kena jemur dulu. Tapi bila pagi dapat roti ration, pagi dapat kita kumpul dulu. Kumpul petang agak tunggu masa masuk bilik baru kita uli dia. Dia dah kering sikit. Bila dah kering senang. Dia dah kering kita pergi buat jenis. Jadi okey lah sampai dia dah betul-betul dah kering jadi tepung boleh.
The prison chefs used simple apparatus found in every cell, plus some help from Mother Nature.
Tahu plastik kat gayung tu macam tadi, tahu roti tu semua uli dia. Jadi dah tentu kita angkat plastik tu cantik. Dia letak kat tinggi sikit. Atas, angin tembak angin. Letak atas. Letak dengan pasir plastik tu sendiri. Tak ada semut, tak ada apa. Letak dia tu. Jadi angin ni kena dia keras. Tapi bila dia keras, dia dah jadi macam biskuit. Kita potong cantik ranguk.
Officially, the prisoners' day ended at 10 o'clock when the warders locked up the inmates in their cells for the night. To add spice to such tedious daily routines, some warders competed to see who could get the job done quickest. The record time was 5 minutes for 50 cells. As night fell over Kuala Lumpur and Pudu jail, people rushed home or crammed into cafes and restaurants. Life didn't stop inside Pudu either. Night was the time to make secret deals. It was called the Hour of the Shooters.
Kita buat macam sumpit tu. Macam sumpit kita tahu barang-barang apa yang kita tahu ketah ke tahu apa ke. Kadang-kadang pun tahu abuk juga lah. Sementara tu sambil nyelam minum air lah kalau ni. Ada yang pakai tali, yang sambung dengan tali lah. Bila kalau tak sampai kita boleh tarik balik tali tu balik. Boleh tarik balik tali, kita tembak balik tali. Kadang-kadang kita kalau tak sampai juga, kita panggil yang balik depan tak, pancing depan tak. Pancing main pas-pas lah. Sana ke sana, sana ke sana.
For many prisoners, as the cell door slammed shut and night fell, there were tantalizing reminders of a life outside.
这半夜嘅時候啊，半夜啊聞到鏗鏗鏗鏗嘅喎，建造房嗰度啊，一聞到啊嘛，福建面，夜晚嘅風吹入嚟，聞到啊嘛，唔知幾時有得食咯，好近啫嘛，但係我等個時間好耐嘛，然後。
For prisoners like Tom, there was always hope for a better life once they had served their time inside. But there were others who never left Pudu jail alive. These were the prisoners on death row, awaiting their appointment with the Pudu hangman. Pudu prison, in the heart of Kuala Lumpur, hidden away inside the prison, is death row. Empty today, these were once the cells of the damned. One of the most infamous death row inmates was Botak Chin. A born rebel, Chin was impatient to get it over with.
Dia ingat itu jam jatuh hukum itu yang gantung. Mana gantung? Boleh lama gantung. Baru jadi. Sampai disiram pakcik dengan air kencing lah. Botak Chin. Asyik lah tu Botak Chin. Dia marah pakcik sama jadi postman lah. Dia pasal dia marah tu lah.
Botak Chin played the hard man all his life. But when he was finally led into the execution chamber, he flinched.
Mana Botak Chin ada steady kong. Naik pergi gantung pun. Kong hai semua tu stun lah.
The death row prisoners dreaded Thursday mornings. That was when an officer read out the list of prisoners to be executed the next day.
Mereka hanya mula gelisah pada hari Rabu. Kita tahu kenapa? Sebab hari Khamis adalah hari pengisytiharan hukuman akan dibaca. Artinya kalau hari Khamis itu ada panggilan, bererti panggilan itu untuk menentukan yang akan digantung pada hari Jumaat.
Normally, 3 hangings were scheduled to take place every Friday. Those who did not make it onto the dreaded Thursday list had another week to live. Abdul Rashid was Pudu's religious counselor. His task was to prepare inmates for the end.
Kalau dia kalah, dia masuk di gantung. Pudu lah. Jadi selama saya duduk dalam penjara tu, saya dah tengok 30 lebih lah. Mula dia gantung 3, lepas tu dia gantung tu dah ketak, dia bagi 2 sampai 94.
Pas sekali lah. Dia pas sekali. Mungkin kalau pasang tu.
The relentless toll of executions filled other prisoners with dread.
Tengah tu mabuk tu ah. Yang ngồi hai bên, ngồi lắm bạn liền ngồi trúng rồi, ngồi pin chứ mà, nhân sinh chỉ chúng nó死嘛。咁你今日你辦到盡，你入到嚟呢度，冇話你講你行運啫嘛，啱冇？你辦到嗰條路可以死嘅，冇得講行運嘅，你講個section嘅。
Prisoners on death row dealt with their fate in different ways. Some were resigned, but others had to be dragged screaming into the execution chamber. Or in the case of communist prisoners, singing. Many of these showed their defiance to the end, striking up the red flag as warders marched them to the execution chamber.
I remember when we hanged the 2 condemned prisoners who shot the chief police officer. He went out singing.
It was a sound familiar to other prisoners.
呢個有時嗰啲緊鐘啊，俾人唱歌打鑼鼓都唔停嘅。即係到我吊人嘅時候，每日我吊人嘅時候，即係每一個禮拜我吊人嘅時候，嗰度唱歌唱到唔停啦。
When Malaysia was gripped by communist insurgencies in the 1980s, singing was often heard on Pudu's death row.
Ramai dia menyanyi tu. Sampai kita dengar pada yang gantung dia menyanyi. Nyanyi semua orang menyanyi lah.
Put a noose around his neck. He was still singing, and he went down singing. So, I think that singing gives him the courage.
For Counselor Abdul Rashid, consoling death row prisoners was always traumatic.
Saya pada pengalaman pertama hukum gantung. Pada 17/11/72. Malam subuh tu gantung, dan malam berikut tu memang saya bila tidur saya nampak tali dari gantung depan saya.
Many death row inmates had to wait months or even years for their sentence to be carried out. Waiting was a kind of torture.
Dia lagi reda, dia ingat dia orang ni kalau budi itu dia jatuh hukum tu jangan gantung. Dia lagi senang, dia tak tunggu tu dia punya penderitaan tu. Macam nak nunggu tu. Kita nak menggantung kan. Dah nunggu sama bertahun-tahun pula. Duduk pula dah dalam bilik aja. Menunggu ni suatu penyiksaan. So, kalau dah laksana hukuman pada dia, itu adalah lebih baik pada dia daripada menunggu berminggu-minggu, berbulan-bulan, bertahun-tahun. Dan ini menyebabkan dia.
They had to be a special breed to properly carry out the rituals of the death chamber. Whenever a hanging was scheduled, a pungent odor heralded the arrival of the executioner.
Sebelum itu dilakukan, biasanya memang adalah beberapa tanda. Misalnya bau kapur barus, itu pun tidak semua orang cium. Misalnya pegawai yang jaga malam tercium ada semacam bau kapur barus. Itu kapur barus biasa digunakan untuk mandikan mayat.
Pudu's executioners were handpicked and had to complete a rigorous training program in Glasgow, Scotland. In the world of the Pudu prison, they were the ultimate professionals. Warders who served longest on death row came to regard it as just another job.
Ya, pasti kalau masa hukum gantung tu pasti ada jaga situ. Pasti sampailah gantung. Tolong orang yang suka gantung ni, dia pukul 6 dah sampailah. Dah sampai dia nak gantung orang tu kan. Maka nak pasang gari orang tu. Kadang tu ada yang melawan.
The apparatus used in the death chamber was also inherited from the British. Nooses were hand-woven in England. A noose was good only for 3 executions, then it was discarded. The best hangmen prided themselves getting the job done quickly.
Gantung dia kan itu ada besi yang ada besi tembaga ni kan. Dia gantung sarung cerat begitu. Tu dia buka ni macam ni terbuka tu kan. Orang gini belakang benda tu terbuka kan. Ada dia.
The most expert executioners could extinguish a life in just 10 seconds.
Turun tu buka lah apa jerat kepala tu buka. Tu juga betul kadang tu kalau orang tak biasa perajan dia buka tu dia bunyi tau. Angin keluar. Dia dah kena tu buka ni bab.
The terrible sound of Pudu's death machine reminded prisoners listening from other wings of the ultimate punishment. Among former inmates of Pudu jail, there is a special elite, a tiny handful of former death row inmates who escaped the hangman's brass-ringed noose. One is Bangkok. In 1984, he was sentenced to death for drug trafficking.
Awak cakap, satu hari nanti kata dia, awak akan dibawa ke tempat. Di situ awak akan menjalani kembang gantung selama nanti. Itu baru kita kata lah. Kita kata lah dia sejuk ke kepanasan dia baru kita kata dalam mahkamah tinggi itu.
Week after week, month after month, Bangkok listened to the death machine at work and wondered when his turn to meet the hangman would come. Death seemed inevitable, but in Malaysia, the king can grant pardons to some prisoners, and Bangkok was lucky, very lucky. Now he's serving out a life sentence in another jail. Both prisoners and their warders avoided discussing death row. It was a forgotten, secretive world. But it was the desperate actions of a death row inmate called Jimmy Chua that would remind the Malaysian public of the existence of Pudu's death row and set in motion the decline and fall of the old prison. The long, hot summer of 1986, Pudu was a human pressure cooker about to explode.
Pudu jail was a time bomb when I was there in 1978 to 1981. It was very crowded. Imagine the prison was built for 600 prisoners, but at that time we had more than 5,000 prisoners.
Cells designed for one man are crammed with 10 or more prisoners. Every warder must oversee at least 300 men. It was a catastrophe waiting to happen. Thousands of prisoners, many of them hardcore criminals, squashed in appalling conditions, with time on their hands and little oversight. Inevitably, the pressure cooker burst. The crisis began when death row inmate Jimmy Chua hatched a plan to break out of the hellhole of Pudu jail. On Monday, October 17, 1986, Chua and 5 other prisoners seized prison doctor Radzi Jafar and Abdul Aziz, a medical assistant in the prison infirmary. Chua demanded that the prison authorities release him and his gang, and the hostages go free. The kidnappers wanted access to a helicopter to fly them to freedom, but the prison governor rejected their demands.
As Director General, I will never let them go out. I'm going to kill them. I'll shoot them in the car.
Pudu jail was now in lockdown.
Dia ada curfew seminggu, tak boleh turun, kena buang tong aja, mandi tak ada, apa tak ada. Suasana kelam kabut lah. Dia kacau belau.
One long-term inmate knew that Chua had no chance of getting out.
Jauh tu lah.
讲黄松马的。